listed for, because someone might think that something is wrong with the property the longer that it sits on the market. So if you're not a homeowner, what that means is that homes are becoming more expensive, and each month that you wait to buy, as well as each year that goes by that you're still a renter, you're going to be losing money. So the percent of list price, that's a comparison of how much a home is listed for compared to how much it ultimately sells for. So this is like what people refer to as a deal, right? Like people are like, oh, I want a good deal on a house. So last year, that number was about 97%. So if a home was for sale for 100,000, that means they paid about 97,000, and you might have saved like 3,000 on the sales price. And $3,000 is $3,000. That is a lot of money. One of my favorite strategies to help the buyers get the most is to get the $3,000 in a closing cost contribution from the seller versus asking for it off the sales price. So that means if we're using the average price of homes, instead of bringing an extra $15,000 out of pocket at closing, you would save like $20 to $30 a month for the next 30 years. So the seller would net the same either way. So it benefits you as a buyer much more to get that money in closing costs. And the closed sales are the total number of sales. So last year we were down by 1.1% at 53,981. And so when there are less homes that sell, there's more competition for buyers, and then for sellers, and then more buyers have more options to choose from. So sellers, this does mean that buyers are pickier than ever, because if you have 10 different homes to choose from, then you can like really nitpick what you don't like or like about a home. And as that number, as well as the month of inventory rise, it's going to become harder to sell your home. So the months of inventory determines whether we're in a buyer's market or a seller's market. So right now we're at about 3.1 months of inventory, and a seller's market is 6 months or less, and a buyer's market is 6 months or above. So we are approaching a buyer's market pretty rapidly, actually. But we are still in a seller's market, so there are still lots of strategies that sellers can use to get their home sold. So this is a slide that I got from the National Association of Realtors, and the source is from the Federal Reserve. So it shows the wealth gap between homeowners and renters, and it goes through 2019, 2024, and it estimates that people who own homes have a net worth of $415,000 on average nationwide, and people who rent pretty consistently have a net worth of anywhere between $7,300 to $10,000. So it just goes to show that you really do have to own a home in order to build wealth. And people saw their grandparents and their parents build wealth this way. They were buying whether the interest rates was like 8%, 12%, 18%. It really didn't matter. Their incomes were also lower. So that means that the mortgage took out a bigger chunk of their check than it does now. So, homeowners do build wealth and renters don't. So we'll talk about how to take those first steps to become a homeowner. And if you are a homeowner, we'll talk about how to take the next steps to actually leverage your home and to grow wealth. Arlicia, can you touch on like people who wait to buy their first home because of the interest rates? I hear that a lot. Like people are like, oh, I'm waiting on the interest rates or the prices to fall. Like, can you kind of share your insights into that?
I always like to talk from experience and stories and clients or individuals that I have worked with and, said that same thing when I talk about scenarios. And so clients who I met during, for instance, COVID that were not wanting to pay $30,000 and $40,000 over the price of a home, even though rates were significantly lower, and who came back, for instance, and said, okay, we're not doing this bidding thing anymore. How much am I approved for now? And now they can't even purchase at the purchase amount that they were approved for during that time.
Mhm.
And the price of homes have still increased since then. So if someone bought a house 2 or 3 years ago, depending on their area, they have gained a lot of equity. And so the value is still there for increase. Even people who purchased after rates started going up, when rates were like 7/8, those individuals still have amassed a lot of equity. And so what happens is those individuals who weren't scared have an opportunity to lower their interest rate, right? They bought and said, I can afford this mortgage payment with the rate that I have, and they have an opportunity to lower their rate. And when the rate lowers and they refinance, and now they have a lower payment, right? That's how I look at things. Now, those individuals who said they weren't going to buy, now they have put themselves on the back burner because they didn't have an opportunity to build any kind of wealth with equity through their home. Plus, they waited, and now they still can't either afford to buy something that they wanted to buy, or have an option to either live where they wanted to live because they waited and thought that, we were going to have this crash. We've been hearing about the crash since COVID. Literally, everybody said the market was going to crash in COVID, and that was 2020.
Yep.
That was
Yep.
5 years ago. And people have just kept getting equity. So my thing I would say is, if the opportunity is available for you to own, regardless of the rate, and if the payment, look at that cat. And if the payment works, for you, what you pay every month, then you purchase a home, because you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You don't eat it in whole. And what I mean by that is, as long as you stick to your budget, you will have an opportunity to build wealth, own a home, and when rates come down, because they will, whatever comes up will come down. We don't know when, but they will. When they come down, you'll also have the opportunity to lower your payment.
Yeah. That's a really good point. So I put a graph on here, and this is also from the Federal Reserve, and it shows the gains that homeowners have seen since COVID and how much home prices have increased since COVID. And I think most of us are in Georgia today. So in Georgia, we saw 64.7% increase in home prices. So that means if you were waiting for the prices to go down, and the funny thing is, Arlicia said it, like in 2020, the buyers who I was working with were like, "Oh, the prices are too high. I'm gonna wait." And the interest rates were like really low, like unhistorically low. And then as the interest rates started going up, the prices never went down here in the metro Atlanta area because we have too little supply and the demand is really high. So we're not going to see the prices come down here. But then they started saying, like, oh, I'm going to wait until the interest rates go down. And this is when they were like 4 or 5%. A couple of years ago, people were like, no, I'm just going to wait until the rates go down. And then in what was that, 2023, 2024, they jumped up to 6, 7%. And now they're like, okay, the prices are high and the interest rates are high. And what people don't realize, like sometimes you're losing so slowly that you think you're winning. And what I mean by that is people who don't own homes right now really are losing so slowly, because owning a home is the quote unquote American dream. It's the way that you are going to build wealth. Most millionaires do have real estate in their portfolio. And there are companies right now who are building new construction communities and they are renting them to people. So that way you get a brand new home and you forget that you don't even own it. And they're making it so that it's so comfortable and cozy for you, because apartments used to drive people into home ownership. And then, people also started going into houses, but it wasn't quite theirs. But with these new construction ones, they're saying, hey, do what you want to do, change it back when you leave. So they're really taking away everything except for the equity that you would gain as a homeowner. Um, and it is okay if you get uncomfortable in a rental, because that could be the inspiration that you need to change your life and your family's life and become a homeowner. Um, so, Arlicia, do you want to go over some of the loan options?
Yeah, we'll go over some of the loan options. So just to kind of like just piggyback and off of what DeAngela just stated, A surefire, you need housing, right? You need somewhere to stay. You have to have somewhere to sleep at night. And the thought process that I have, and I think I kind of like to tell my clients, is that you might as well make money while you're there, because you're going to go to sleep and wake up in a home every single day. Why not allow that property that you're doing that in to be something that allows you to build wealth? I have had clients who, even myself, I'll tell this one quick story and then we'll go into the products. But my home that I purchased before my current home, it doubled in price. So I bought it 1 year. Not 2 years later, it was double the price that it was that I purchased it in. I'm not just stating that you should own a home because, I do mortgages. I honestly believe in the power that home ownership and the wealth that it allows individuals to build. The money that I made from that home sale, I would have never, it would have took me several years to work to make that much money that I made. It more than doubled in price. And so I say all that just before we start, as we talk about these different products and you realize, hey, I meet the criteria of some of this stuff. I am here along with DeAngela to help you come up with a plan to make home ownership possible for you. So the first product we're going to talk about is the most common product that people talk about when they hear. You got something to say?
I do. I have something to say. And it was gonna like, okay, so I told you we're talking to people of all levels today, right? So yes, owning a home is that first step so you can start building equity, but equity is like this make-believe number until you use it. And if you talk to anyone who owned a home, like when the market crashed back in like '08, people who own homes then lost them because they had this equity, but the values plummeted so quickly that they weren't able to use that equity. So yes, equity is nice. Like I talk to people who have one, two, $300,000 in equity in their homes, and they just are sitting on it. Like you, Arlicia is going to go into that, but you could take out some of that equity and buy rental properties. You could take out some of that equity and pay off your debt to buy another home that suits your needs. You could buy down your interest rates and get into another home that suits your needs with that equity. So, yes, once you get a home, you do start building equity. But the way to grow your wealth is to leverage the equity by investing in real estate or other investment tools. I speak about real estate because that's what I understand as far as the tool to build wealth. Okay. Thanks, Arlicia.
So FHA loans, which most people, when most people, even if they don't know anything about mortgages, they talk about FHA mortgage. They say, I want an FHA loan. Okay. Now, one of the things that people think is that an FHA loan is for a first-time home buyer. It is not. Okay. So that's a really big misconception, is that FHA mortgages are only for first-time home buyers. You don't have to be a first-time home buyer to use an FHA mortgage. You can use an FHA mortgage multiple times. You can have an FHA mortgage, sell a house, use an FHA mortgage again. It's not like a first-time home buyer product per se. The minimum credit score for an FHA is 500, but we can buy at 500, but that does require a larger down payment. Our goal is to have at least a minimum credit score of 580. That allows us to have 3.5% down. So just to put things in perspective, if it's $100,000 home, then you only need $3,500. If it's a $200,000 home, you need about $7,000 down. The loan limits do vary by county with FHA. That's one of the restrictions that they do have, is that there is a limit on the loan amount. The loan amount is typically based on the county and the state that you're in. So some counties and states may have a higher loan amount than others. I looked up Georgia. Most of Georgia is about a $524,000 loan limit. And that is the limit of the loan. So that means you can purchase slightly above that so that you can put down your 3.5%. There may be some areas in Georgia that have a slightly lower one and a slightly higher one, just depending on the income. HUD comes up with the loan limits based on the demographics of the area. Why most people like FHA is because It's a very flexible and easy loan. Most people think that FHA is for people with bad credit, but it's not. I've had doctors, okay, physicians who are just out of school using FHA loan to purchase their property because they wanted to do the minimum down, even though they had wonderful credit. People with great credit use FHA loans all the time. The debt to income. That's one of the reasons why people like the loan product, is because FHA will allow you to spend more of your money when purchasing a home. And one of the things that and the reason because of this is because they have something called upfront mortgage insurance. It's like a premium that you pay, and you pay this premium just in case the loan defaults or anything like that. This kind of came about during the crash of the market, but it is a benefit to the consumer because, again, those who may have challenging credit are able to purchase. If someone is looking to buy at a little higher price point than, a conventional loan product, then this is a great tool to use. And then the interest rate on a government-backed loan like FHA is always, and when I say always lower than a conventional rate. Okay. And so what we normally do is, if someone qualifies for both an FHA mortgage and a conventional mortgage, I like to give them the numbers and say, hey, if you're not doing 20% down, this is what an FHA mortgage looks like. This is what a conventional mortgage looks like. Which one do you think makes more sense to go with? And that's how sometimes I may have someone who is a high earner, like a doctor, a physician, who says, hey, I'm buying at this lower price point. This is my first time buying. I just graduated school. I'm going to take this FHA mortgage because it just makes more sense for me today. So we always look at numbers in a specific client scenario to determine which one makes sense for you. The next product is conventional loans. So conventional loans have a slightly higher credit score requirement. Credit minimum is 620. There are some products that go lower than that, but it just doesn't make sense to utilize it, honestly, because the rates would just be ridiculously high. Minimum down payment on conventional is 3 to 5%. And the loan limit for conventional loans is $806,000. Now, remember, your loan limit is your loan amount, and you go slightly above that depending on how much you're going to put down. So if you put 3% down, 5% down, you can purchase at somewhere around 820 or so-ish purchase price. Conventional, it's still easy qualifying for those that qualify, right? You just need to have stable income. There are some caveats, like FHA loans. They want a 2-year job history. It doesn't have to be the most recent, but they do want a 2-year job history. Conventional loans may allow you to just have 1-year job history, right? For the most recent. They want a little bit stronger credit up front. Their DTI limits are 50%. So unlike FHA, which allows you to go up to about 55% of your income, conventional says, hey, I'm going to cap you at somewhere between 45 and 50% of your gross income. There's no upfront mortgage insurance on conventional loans, but then that kind of picks back on that's why the rates are slightly higher, because there's no insurance per se for the lender to make sure that if you default, that they are paid back. And that's kind of what that FHA stuff does for you. Then we have VA loans. So these are for our veterans. And thank you. Wait, is that VA? Because I can't see good. Okay, yes. USDA. So USDA loans are government-backed loans are as well. And I can share the link in the chat shortly. I'll pull it up really quick. These are loans where you don't have to put any money down. Okay. They will allow you to purchase a home with 0 down. They don't necessarily have a minimum credit score. And sometimes we say that in the mortgage industry, but there are overlays, what we call them, where lenders prefer a certain score. So 640 is recommended. If your credit score is a little bit lower than that and you qualify for a home in a USDA area, then what we will do, which is work with you to try to get that score up. There are no loan limits with the USDA loan, but you can only purchase a USDA loan. You can only purchase with a USDA loan in a USDA area. Okay. So although there are no loan limits, the home has to qualify. USDA means rural, right? It's where the lower population is. So typically the price points of the homes in that area are somewhat lower. So although there are no loan limits, it's not like you're going to find $1 million home sitting in a USDA eligible area. Okay. The property, obviously here with ease must be in an eligible area. There are income restrictions. So that's one of the things about USDA that's kind of a caveat, is they do have income restrictions based on your household size. And it's somewhere around, depending on how many people in your family, somewhere around $110,000 annually is the cap. And then it gradually goes up. Yes, I do lend it in Georgia, Nelson. The good thing about USDA loans, though, is that there is no PMI private mortgage insurance like the FHA loan had, or upfront fee. But depending on where you are, there could be some additional fees that do apply with your mortgage. USDA loans are they're not necessarily as easy to qualify for with FHA, because they have a tighter DTI. So with USDA loans, unlike FHA that allows you to go up to 55% of your income, USDA likes to cap you somewhere around 43, 45%. And these different numbers, so I mentioned conventional at 50, FHA at 55, USDA at 43, 45. The difference between these DTI numbers, just about 5%, is hundreds of dollars a month, which means it can cap you off depending on the product that you're using with what you go with. So this is why I like to say all loan types aren't the same for every client. If you qualify for multiple products, then what we will do is look at all that you qualify for and make sure the numbers work based on what you need and your credit profile. The next product we're going to talk about is VA loans. VA loans, they're probably one of my most favorite loans, is because even though I have on here credit minimum, the VA itself does not have a minimum credit score for veteran loans, VA loans. There is no minimum credit score. Lenders on top of that rule may have a minimum. And so typically what will happen is, if I get a vet, for instance, that has a lower score than what most lenders require, I will just, than what my lender requires, I'll just use a different lender. So as a mortgage broker, I have access to 18, 20 different lenders. We will use a lender that does not have a minimum score requirement. There is no down payment requirement, just like USDA loans on a VA loan. There are no loan limits on VA loans, right? They are very lenient to the veteran with allowing them to purchase real estate. Obviously, with VA loans, there are qualifying. You either need to be an eligible veteran or active duty service member. There's no PMI. There is a upfront fee that you do pay with VA. And that fee is typically rolled into the loan. So you don't pay it up front. It's called the funding fee. Depending on if you are disabled or a disabled retiree, or then you don't have to pay that funding fee, but that's a fee that you can, that is paid to the VA, and it's rolled into the loan. Again, with VA loans, no money down, no minimum credit. It is super easy. A lot of times with especially government-backed loans like FHA, VA, USDA, one of the misconceptions from sellers, and this is probably super important for the homeowners on here, is that these type of loans will have restrictions to the seller from a buyer. If a buyer is presenting an offer to you with these type of loans, then they think, oh, well, I can't have, a bad roof, for instance. Number one, the lender is not looking at the roof. Neither is the appraiser, for that matter. That's a whole different live. But the inspector may look at it, right? But those are things like a bad roof on a home is not something that, unless it's an active leak, is not something that will cause a VA loan, a FHA loan, or a USDA loan to be denied. Okay. So I just want to throw that out there. Now there are obviously, someone's buying a home, there are some safety things that all lenders will look for, but I just threw that because that's one of the misconceptions that people bring up. Oh, I have to change the roof on my house. It's old or something like that. And they have a government loan offered to them. Sellers, you don't have to worry about it for the loan, but you may have to worry about it for the inspection from the buyer.
Arlicia, before we
Yes.
move on, will you, for the first time buyers and maybe some of the homeowners, remind us what PMI MIP stands for and the benefit and drawback of having a loan with that on there?
So, with the private mortgage insurance, the benefit is specifically with like FHA is that it allows you to have a higher DTI and lower credit score because you have mortgage insurance on your loan. So the lender, for instance, is saying, hey, if something goes wrong, then I'm going to get paid back because I got insurance on it. Now, the same is with conventional. You have mortgage insurance on it as well if you do anything less than 20%. So mortgage insurance is simply insurance on the mortgage for the lender, not you as a consumer. And it's a way that they feel protected. So typically, if you do less than 20% down, your interest rate is slightly better than if you do 20 because, when I say slightly, I may mean like an eighth of basis points, nothing very significant. But the reason why is because lenders actually like to have mortgage insurance because it covers them should a loan default. DSCR loans. So these are for our investors. These are for someone who's looking to maybe do rental properties or invest in real estate. These are not loans that are used as an end user or someone who's going to live in that property. DSCR loans are loans that have no income, right? So we use the property to qualify the individual to buy it. These loans do require a larger down payment. So typically 20 to 25% down. The loan amounts they vary by area, but I mean, you can pretty much buy any price point, okay, as long as you have your down payment. The way it works, for instance, when I say we don't look at income to qualify you and we look at the property, let's say the mortgage on that property that you're looking to buy, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, $500,000 in Atlanta, Georgia, and the mortgage payment is $3,500. They want the rent that you're going to get from that property to be equal to or more than the mortgage payment. And that's how you meet your debt service coverage ratio, which is what the DSCR stands for. Okay. It's simply saying that, hey, we're not using your income to qualify you, but we know that this property is going to generate enough income to cover the mortgage payment, and we're going to allow you to purchase this property with it. You can buy 100 properties without us ever asking you if you can afford to do it, as long as you have your down payment and as long as your debt service coverage ratio is met. These are what we call investor-friendly loan products because, sometimes self-employed individuals tend to not, file their taxes and tell Uncle Sam what they really made. These are products that they love to use to do it. So is it KESA? Can a DSCR loan use working income and property? No, because the way it works, again, now you can KESA. The way it works is they are looking at the property itself to qualify. Now, you can buy a home with your income to qualify you for that property. And that would just be a traditional conventional mortgage. And we would use your income and we would still do something similar to the DSCR. But we would do what we call in our industry a rent schedule, where we look at that property and obtain our appraisal report that will give us the value of the home as well as what the projected rent is. And if that projected rent is equal to or more than that mortgage payment, then we would couple that with your income to qualify you to buy it. Um, why would someone go that route over the DSCR loan is because, well, why would someone go the DSCR loan over that route is because if it's a rental property, most times people put rental properties in their business name or LLCs. They try to limit the liability to their personal selves when they have investment property. And so this allows that. When you do it with a traditional mortgage, it's going in your name. It is your personal property, even though it's an investment property. There's more liability to you. And the interest rates are pretty much very similar between a DSCR loan and a conventional investment loan that takes your income into consideration. A lot of people don't want to tie up their income as well, so they go with a DSCR loan because typically these loan products, typically not all the time, but typically do not show up on your personal credit. And so you're not tying up your information for something that you may want to do down the line. So you could do a version of what I'm explaining on a traditional mortgage, but it may not be the best product or the best way to do it if it's for an investment loan. And then you have no income loan. So the DSCR is a no income loan, but that's for an investor. Then there are no income loans for individuals who are looking to purchase a home and live in that home. These do require a larger down payment. So, when people say, oh, there's loan products where you don't have to show your income as a primary home. Yes, there are. But now you're talking 20% down as a minimum down payment. And again, this is something that is ideal for someone who's probably self-employed, who makes money, but doesn't necessarily show it on paper. This may be a loan product for them that is ideal because, maybe sometime down the line, they'll refinance it. But no income loans, they do exist, but they always require a larger down payment. Minimum credit score is somewhere around 620. We got down payment percent anywhere between 10 to 30% down. The loan limits, again, they will just vary by lender. So depending on where you want to purchase at and your purchase price, we will determine what lender we'll go with. They are designed for self-employed borrowers. We can also use bank statement loans. Now, if we do a no income loan, which we call, it's not necessarily no income if we're using your bank statements, but we're just not using traditional income. You can do as little as 10% down. Again, these are loan product. This is a loan product ideally for someone who's self-employed. It only makes sense because the higher interest rates and the higher down payment is kind of that catch that someone who's working on a W-2 job or who's filing their income where they're not writing everything off may not make sense to go with a product like this. This is everybody's favorite topic, right? Especially if they're a buyer. I want that house. My friend bought a house with no money down. And they got down payment assistance, which is good. Down payment assistance exists. It's a great product. I have used it for individuals to help them purchase homes, but there is always a catch. And what do I mean by that? The catch is, and it can be several things, right? The catch is, remember we talked about that DTI earlier with USDA capping you at somewhere between 43 and 45%, FHA capping you at 55%, conventional capping you at 50% of your income, right? When it comes to down payment assistance, they have restrictions on, number one, how much money you can spend, which is the biggest turnoff for buyers, especially in our market now, because if the rate is higher, the homes cost more, and now you can't spend as much as you want to spend. It literally dwindles down the availability of homes that fit your criteria in your budget. The down payment covers typically your down payment. So that's either 3 to 5% of the purchase price. There are some programs that will allow you to have a portion of the money that they give you to use towards your closing costs. Most down payment assistance programs have a minimum credit score of 620. There are some that may have more. Down payment assistance is not a blanket program. It depends on the city, the county, the state, right? The lender, all of that comes into play. The down payment assistance program supersedes the lender. Okay. So I may say to you, hey, you can buy a $500,000 home. The down payment assistance may say, oh no, we will only allow them to buy up to $300,000. And that's the only way we're going to give them a grant. If that's the case, we have to go by the rules of the down payment assistance program. Down payment assistance is typically not forgiven because it is a down payment assistance up until certain criteria is met. So they may say you have to stay in a home for 10 years before they forgive it, with a decline, with it, decreasing year by year. Some of them have a 5-year period of living there and it has to be a primary home. Some of them aren't ever forgiven. They say that at any point in time that you refinance and sell your home, you have to pay back this assistance. These are some of the things that we don't necessarily hear when people talk about it. Most down payment assistance programs are not forgivable without certain criteria being met. Now, there are grants, which are different from down payment assistance. I didn't do a slide on it, but grants are typically forgiven because it's a grant. It's like free money. Even though it's forgiven, they still have criteria behind it as well, meaning how long do you have to stay there? How much will they limit you? So with down payment assistance, their limit may be 31% of your income. Because essentially what you're telling the lender and this program is that I am having a difficult time saving my money, or I need help with my down payment. And because you need that help, the lender and the down payment assistance program says, okay, we will help you. But in order for you to be successful while you own this home, we're also going to cap off what you can spend out of your monthly income. So we're going to take you down, instead of that 55% or that 50%, we're going to take you all the way down to 31, 40% of your income. The down payment assistance programs typically have a super tight DTI requirement. Most times they have restrictions that you have to be a first-time home buyer or haven't owned a home in the last 3 years. There are most times income restrictions on the product as well, meaning you cannot make too much money in order to get the assistance. And most assistance do allow you to utilize the product with all of the loan products that I mentioned earlier. There are products for down payment assistance programs that even veterans can use to pay for their closing costs, obviously. There are, products for nurses and teachers, again, all which come with very tight guideline restrictions. So normally what happens is if someone says, hey, I want to use this product, I let them see like, hey, this is what you're going to get with the product of a down payment assistance, and this is what you're going to get if you don't take it. Because a lot of times people do have the money saved or a way to get the money, but most people don't want to use their own money when they purchase a home, right? And so when they find out that these restrictions take place, then they say, okay, Arlicia, yeah, I want to pay my down payment because I can't find anything, or I don't want to be limited to what I'm able to buy.
Okay, Arlicia, I want to just jump in here because I talk to a lot of people, and some of them, like you said, don't want to spend the money. But there are some people I talk to who just don't have the money. They might make the money, but they aren't saving the money, which is a different problem, which I think could be helped by a budget. Because no, like I tell my clients, free money is the most expensive money that you'll ever get. Like these programs, they might cost you time, they might cost you a higher interest rate, they might cost you in ways that you can't imagine. And then I have people who sell their home and forget that they got the down payment assistance and have this second mortgage that they have to repay out of their proceeds. So since we're building wealth, I tell people you want to be able to prove to yourself that you can save money because once you buy a home, there are going to be different things that pop up like repairs, insurance is going to increase, taxes are going to increase, and you want to be able to comfortably cover those things while still living your life. Like you don't want to be house poor. Which is another reason that these programs put like such tight criteria on how much of your income you can spend. Down payment assistance is great if you need it. And when I say need, I mean like absolutely need it. However, my like preferred way for everyone to buy a house is with their own money. So that way you can go on to do some of these things we're talking about, like leveraging your equity to build your wealth and buy income producing properties.
Yes. Um, and I always tell people, hey, especially not to be house poor, is what's your monthly budget? What are you comfortable with? And then we work our way backwards from there. So people come up with a monthly budget. We come up with a purchase price that fits that budget. And then we come up with a game plan for individuals to save. Most times when people don't save is because they don't, I said most, not all the time, but most time is because they don't have a written budget. And they're not necessarily just looking where money is being spent every month. Right now is the perfect time if you are wanting to buy, and let's say you don't have a lot saved and you need like a little boost, is because it's tax season time. So that's something that will help kind of jumpstart your saving if you haven't already saved. There are strategic ways where, I work with DeAngela where seller concession can help play a role in helping cover that cost. But I have to agree, you want to be in a habit as a homeowner of just saving money anyway, because there is no landlord to call when you own your home. You are the landlord.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons like when I talk to people, they're like, I want to buy a home, but I just am afraid of the repairs. Like I'm afraid of repairs too. That's why like I have a home warranty. I don't think anyone who owns a home here likes having repairs. We spent close to $25,000 last year because we had like a leak and then we had another leak and then we had our HVAC go out and we just we had to do it because we can't live in a home with no bathrooms or no HVAC, but it's something that you just want to really be prepared for once you become a homeowner. But don't let that scare you because the alternative is not building your equity.
So bridge loan options, this is a great tool for those who currently own. This is where you would get a loan to help purchase another property before your home sells. And that's exactly what the name, a bridge. This is going to help you bridge that gap between what you own and then owning another home. So it'll allow you to not count the debt of your current home so that you can purchase another home. And then you have anywhere from about 4 to 6 months to sell your property. And depending on where you are, it may not take that long to sell, but this is an option for, and this bridge loan will allow you to pull that equity that you have in your current home to help cover the down payment and the closing costs for the home that you're buying. It's a temporary loan. It's repayable once you sell the home that you're currently in. And the process is very easy. Obviously, it's going to have a higher interest rate than like a loan that you would use to purchase a home because it's just a temporary product. But the hope is that individuals who use this product is that because they're saving because they're not waiting for a house to sell, and home values to appreciate in whatever timeline that is, right? Because if the average days on market, what was your report, Dee? How was the average days on market again?
We're at about 28 right now.
So, 30 or 45, 30 to 45 days to sell a home plus somebody to buy, and then you have to buy and sell another home that time period. Whatever you're paying with the higher rate will probably wash all of that out by being able to buy a lot sooner. And then it just gives you time for peace of mind where you don't have to rush to get out of the current home you're in trying to, buy and sell at the same time and move into another home. It just allows peace of mind, and that is priceless most times. You get anywhere between 20 to 30% of your equity. Sometimes there are loan limits depending on the value of the home that you're coming out of and the value of the home that you're buying. Bridge loan options only work for individuals who are purchasing with a conventional loan. Okay, they do not allow, they do not work if you're not purchasing with a conventional product. So you must meet the criteria that we talked about before for conventional. If it's a VA loan that you're using to buy or an FHA, then a bridge loan option won't work for you. And the reason why is because conventional loans have a rule to them that says if a home is under contract pending close, then we don't have to count that home in the DTI. And FHA, VA, and USDA do not have that rule. HELOCs, this is another, it's kind of like a bridge product, but it's something that you can use to purchase real estate or anything else for that matter. So home equity line of credits, I like to explain them like they're like credit cards for your house. When we talked about that equity earlier, and Dee mentioned that you got equity, but if you don't use it, you can lose it. Then this is where a home equity line comes into play. What most individuals do who understand real estate and how it works is they will take out a home equity line of credit for their home so they never lose their equity, even if they don't use it. What do I mean? Let's say your house is worth $300,000 and you only owe 100 and you got $200,000 in equity. Well, if that market drops and now your home is only worth 150, then that other $150,000 you had is gone. People will take out a HELOC to tie that equity up, to hold it, to freeze it. People also use home equity lines of credits to purchase additional real estate. I had a client just about 2 weeks ago. They took out $259,000 in equity on a HELOC to build 2 properties in the South Florida area. And they purchased their home, just so you know, 3 years ago. 3 years ago, and they already have 250. They actually got more than that because with a HELOC, you can only take out a certain amount, typically about 90% of your value. So they got a little bit more equity than that 259, but they took out $259,000. They are using that money to build 2 properties in South Florida that they're going to build and sell. And they are going to use that money to build it with cash, right? So 3 years, they're making $260,000. And this is kind of like the story I talked about with me earlier. It's like it would have took me forever to make the money that I was able to get out my equity. And all I did was go to sleep and stay there every night. I also had a lady about a week ago, same thing. She took out about $60,000. For her reason, it was just to consolidate all of her debt. She wanted to consolidate all of her debt. So she took out $60,000 in a HELOC. So you can use a HELOC for pretty much anything, right? You can use it to consolidate debt. You can use it to pay off some bills to help your credit score increase. You can use it to transition from one home to another. You can use it to buy real estate as an investor. This is money that you can use a HELOC to buy a house with the DSCR loan that we talked about earlier. And you don't have to prove that you can actually afford it, quote unquote, on paper, because we know the rent that you make from that property is going to pay for your mortgages, right? The way you get a HELOC, again, you need to have sufficient equity. Most HELOCs have an adjustable rate, so it's the prime plus a margin. So the prime is about 8.5 plus a margin. A margin, it will depend on what your credit score is. So that rate can be anywhere from 8.5 to 11% interest rate, which is probably cheaper than most of your credit cards, some of y'all car notes, things like that, which is why people consolidate their debt. And then ideal, even if you're using a HELOC to buy real estate or build, you're going to make so much money that the interest rate will wash itself out. typically with HELOCs, it's a withdrawal period. So most HELOCs have a 5, 10-year withdrawal period, and then they have terms of 15 to 20 to 30 years. A withdrawal period means the amount of time that it will allow you to pull money from the HELOC, right? So what some people do is they will take out a HELOC, and if they don't use it immediately, they know that they got 5 to 10 years to draw from it. If they don't use it, they'll get another HELOC. Okay. So that way they always have this money available. When you open a HELOC, there is no more qualifying for it. You got $200,000 in equity. That's your $200,000 to use as you see fit. We're not going to come back and say, oh, you got $200,000, you used 100, and now you want to use another 100. Let's say you lost your job, you don't got no more income, you need to pay some bills, and now you got $100,000 available on that HELOC. Nobody's going to say, hey, do you qualify for this HELOC? Do you qualify to take this money out at this time? And that's one of the good things about a HELOC is the flexibility behind it, that it would allow you to use it over and over again without qualifying for it again. Does that make sense?
Thank you so much, Arlicia, for reviewing the loan types. So now I would like to, well, actually, before we get into questions, I want to share a story about one of my clients. Arlicia touched on this, but I think the impact of it wasn't quite felt. So she mentioned you can use these loan products or your equity to pay off debt. So I had a couple who they were living in a home. It was 3 bedrooms, and it was them, and then they had 2 kids, and they just felt like it wasn't enough space for them. So they didn't see a way for them to buy, and we wrote out their budget, and then I was not really clear where their money was going. So then I had them write out their debt. And once they wrote out their debt, we realized they had a significant amount monthly going towards their debt. So we were able to sell their property. They paid off all their debt. And even though their mortgage amount did increase because the rates were higher than when they initially purchased, their overall monthly payments were lower because they used the equity in their house to pay off their debt. So they still were able to have more money that they were bringing home every month. So that's just one way that you really can use your equity to get into a home that better suits your needs, even if you don't necessarily see the path forward. Some people submitted questions when they registered. So one of the questions, I think this is for you, Arlicia, is how do you improve your credit score?
So it depends on what your credit score is, what's on there that's affecting your score, what's making your score low. I'm not necessarily a credit repair person. So, you have to take my information from experience. But typically keeping your credit cards under 30%, just paying your bills on time that you currently have, right? One of the things I tell people, if you think you're going to be late with something, call the creditor. They're not willing to work with you. Most creditors will give you time so that they don't report your credit late. And a lot of times when people get in a crunch, they just let it go. They don't call anybody. And then it's just reporting late. But if you call them and say, hey, I can't pay this for so many days, or I can only pay this amount, they will halt just putting you on a past due. Keeping your credit cards underneath 30%, reviewing your credit. Sometimes I talk to individuals and they don't know what their score is. They don't know what's on their credit, what's there, what needs to be repaired, fixed, or paid. And then be willing to work on those things, right? I tell people you want to be a successful homeowner and you want to be a homeowner with good credit because, kind of like we touched on before, let's say something comes up, but now you can open up a credit card and just maybe pay something off. But if we go into it not necessarily on the right foot and we don't get on the right foot, it can become a vicious cycle. And I'm all about being a good homeowner, smart homeownership tips, and being a good steward of those things that we have. So most times what I'll do is look at someone's report and kind of see if there's anything that I can kind of just touch on that they need to work on. But some of the simple things would just be keeping your credit report, credit cards, I'm sorry, underneath that 30% ratio. If there are things like collections or charge offs on there that you may need to either get on a payment plan to fix or pay off, review those things. I've had people, who may have like something for $50 or $60 that they had to pay off that boosted their score 30, 40 points. Most times when we know our credit isn't the best, we just don't look at it, right? We're like, I'm not looking at this report. It's bad. I don't want to see it. I know it's not good. And we don't want to be that way, right? We want to look at our credit. We want to know what's there, because that's one of the first things I ask all my clients is, hey, what's your credit score? And like, oh, I don't know. I haven't checked it. I check my score like every other day. So it's a habit. So know your credit, and that'll help you just stay up on it. And then obviously, like I said, if you think you're going to be late on something, call that credit in advance. Keep your credit cards low. Credit is like a game. You can manipulate it. You literally can manipulate your credit to increase. If there's a high card and you pay it off, your score is going to jump up 30, 40 points just from doing that. It's just all about the game.
Yeah, and paying your credit card late, like Arlicia saying, that's the number one category. Like there are percentages of how much each thing affects your credit score, and paying anything that reports to your credit card late is like the number one thing that hurts your credit the most. And credit repair doesn't necessarily help that, because it's just like if you had a friend that came and asked you to borrow like $500 every week and they paid you back late every week, like eventually you're gonna be like, okay, I'm not giving you this $500 anymore, because you don't pay you don't repay me on time. And that's how the creditors are looking at late payments as well, is if you weren't paying this person late, then how could you pay them on time? One of the other questions that we got were the steps to buy. And one of the things that you want to do is find out your spending power through a pre-approval. And that's really the first step, is to get your pre-approval. And even if you don't think you're ready, you still want to get a pre-approval, because it's not like you get approved or denied with my team. Like Arlicia is going to say like either you're approved and you and I can start shopping, or she's going to say, here's a plan of what you need to do over whatever time frame it takes for your specific situation. And then we'll follow up with you throughout that plan. So you're not ever going to be on your own when it comes to like getting your actual pre-approval. But once you have that pre-approval in hand, we'll have a strategy session. And if you're selling or leasing your property, and we'll also have a strategy session to create a timeline, because really the only difference between buying as like a first-time buyer and buying when you also have to sell or lease a property is the preparing a property that has to be marketed, and also coming up with a timeline, whether you're going to use a bridge loan, like our Alicia mentioned, and move out first before we put it on the market, or if you need to do both at the same time, which we can talk about your specific situation. But if you do have a home to sell or home to lease, it's ideal for us to meet, like I would say like 3 to 6 months in advance. So that way I can make recommendations of repairs and upgrades. One of the saddest things I've seen, like, is one of my clients, they were referred to me, and before we met, they like put all of this money into upgrading and doing things that really weren't going to make a difference on their bottom line. So what they had done was spend the money that they needed to buy their next property, upgrading things that they weren't going to get repaid for. So I would say that's where you really want to lean on my advice to help guide you on what today's buyers are looking for in a home. And then also have we can get a pre-listing inspection or a pre-listing appraisal if we're not quite sure of where to price the property. So I can just help guide you through those things. And then you also want to save, and everyone asks, how much money do I need to save? And we'll find that out during your pre-approval process. And now that it's tax season, like this is a perfect time of year to go ahead and start that process so you can, even if you're not ready, you'll know how much you need to save to get ready, and you can use your tax money to kind of like boost your savings to get ready to buy whenever that time comes. Arlicia, do you want to share any other strategies for saving money?
Um, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but having a written budget. If you find it difficult to save, or if you're not consistent with saving, having a budget to account for where your money is going is going to help you to save and get to this point of home ownership a lot faster. Even if, and I just want to make sure, like, even if we qualify for the down payment assistance or the grant, even if those things all work out, they all have requirements that there are still some type of minimum contribution from you as a buyer. So some of them may say you still have to contribute 1 or 2% towards that purchase. You have to do an inspection, you have to do an appraisal, right? So those are all things that have to be paid for. And so I just in case someone's on thinking, well, I'm going to do the down payment assistance, I'm going to get whatever I can get, I'm not worried about any of that. You still, again, just touching back on it, want to be in a habit of saving. And a great way to do that is to have a written budget.
Awesome, thank you. So those were the written questions that we got. So we will open it up for other questions. But before I do that, I just wanted to give you all a chance to share your feedback if you did enjoy today. And even if you didn't, we want to hear about that as well. Like, what could we do to improve? We've put our QR codes on there so you can scan and share your feedback with us as a way to just say thank you for us sharing with you today. And while you all do that, are there any questions that you all have thought of since we have been sharing everything today? You can feel free to unmute yourselves. Okay. Well, let's talk about the next steps. Arlicia, do you want to share about next steps?
Yes. So next steps is to complete an application. This link should take you to our a consultation where we do a consultation prior to you do an application, or we'll do it simultaneously. At this point, we will go over whether or not you qualify. If you do, obviously, like Dee said, you'll go out and start shopping for a home, and we'll have a game plan for that. If you don't, we will write down a specific game plan for you on what you need to do to be ready to buy. And we'll look at a timeline that works for you. So if that timeline is 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever that is, we'll come up with a timeline for you on getting you to purchasing. And then we will have monthly check-ins depending on that timeline to make sure that you are on track to buy. I want to make sure that I kind of said it at the beginning, but I want to reiterate it, is that, our goal is to help you get, if you're not an owner, is to help you get to that point of owning a home. And if you are a owner, we want to show you how to leverage the equity that you currently have to help you build wealth by whatever means necessarily. And so we are here to do specifically what you need in your situation, which is never cookie cutter across the board. So everybody on here has a different need, and we will make up a plan and a goal to make sure you make it there. So when you take a picture of that, it's going to take you to a consultation link, and that's where me and DeAngela will meet you via Zoom again. We like Zoom. And we will discuss all your needs to prepare you for your next step.
Well, I would just, okay, Kisa, I see your hand is raised. Um, Feel free to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. I had a question, but if it's something that you wanted to finish, Dee, I can wait.
No, please go.
Okay. Yeah, because it's kind of backtracking a bit. So let's say that I'm in a situation to where I own a home, and I'm kind of torn between actually renting it out and doing an Airbnb, because I live in an area that is high. Like in my subdivision, they're mostly rental townhouses. So that's kind of I guess appealing, but literally the townhome next to me is an Airbnb, and I've seen it the last couple of years, and it's, you know, it's constantly someone there, and I've spoken to the house manager there, and you know, she says that it's been lucrative for her. So when it comes to the DSCR, I believe was the name of it, is that program specific to long-term leasing versus short-term rentals?
Both.
Okay.
Both. You can use that DSCR product for short and long-term leasing. So when they do that, when they look up the rent, instead of looking at what the long-term rent would be, they would use another type of appraisal process where they look up what the short-term rental income would be. And as long as that projected rental amount over the course of the year equals the amount that you need per month for the mortgage, it still qualifies.
I'm so glad you explained it like that, because just from my research alone, a lot of times the short-term properties generate more income on the monthly basis than a rental, but because things like that tend to be seasonal, it may not balance out over the course of a year. So that makes total sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And something else, Kisa, from a real estate perspective, is an Airbnb and a long-term rental. They're both businesses, right? So when you start a rental business, you just have to also consider your expenses, which are a little different for each one. When you have an Airbnb, you have more expenses every time someone checks out, versus when you have a long-term rental, you might have more like bigger, larger cost expenses every time a lease turns over. So, and we can talk about your property of like what materials to put in there. Like for instance, when we bought our property, we knew that we would want to use it as a long-term rental. So we like pulled up all the carpet and put like luxury vinyl tile throughout, and we have granite countertops, and we know that our turnover in between tenants will be less because the materials are harder to tear up, basically. So that's something that you also want to consider when going which way, which we can schedule a consultation and talk about. So even if you are like a first-time buyer, or if you want to sell or lease your property, I would still encourage you to do the application to get your approval, because that's going to really dictate how we handle your current property, how much you're approved for, and what you can do with the equity that you have in your property as well. That was a really good question. Thank you, Kisa. Does anybody else have any question? And I'm gonna, not to put you on the spot, if it's okay if you don't want to, iPhone, but I saw that you felt like you had a lot to process. Do you want to come on and like maybe share like a question that you have, because someone else might be feeling the same thing and just not wanting to speak up maybe. And if you don't, it's perfectly okay. No pressure. Okay. And then Nelson said, what if you try to sell your house while trying to buy one? You do find a house you like, but my pre-approval is based on when my house is sold. Okay, so that's a good question. So when you're selling your house and buying another one, unless you're using a bridge loan, you really want your house that you're selling to be under contract before we start shopping for the next one. Because while you're the seller, you might get an offer from a buyer saying that they want to buy your house, but they're not going to buy it unless their house sells. And oh, by the way, my house isn't even on the market yet. Like as the seller, you're going to be like, I'm probably going to move on to the next buyer who's a little more ready to go. So you want to set yourself up for success when you're buying, by having your house under contract, because it's a lot easier to ask that seller to take their house off the market and wait for yours to sell if it's under contract. That was a really good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Arlicia, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I look forward to meeting everyone. Hope you all reach out. I would love to answer any questions that you guys have, thoughts, even if you're an owner and you don't plan on buying in the next couple or selling in the next couple months, or a buyer and you don't plan to, I would love just to still speak with you all just to make sure, you start on the right foot.
Thank you. Kisa?
I'm sorry. One more question came to mind, Arlicia, when you started speaking, and it's for you. So I know you mentioned where, of course, if you have a rental property, a lot of people do it in their business names. I started an real estate investing journey a couple years ago, and I have a business for that, a LLC set up and everything. I have yet to use it because I've been wanting to find the easiest way to do so, as opposed to just getting into wholesaling. So you mentioned earlier putting the home in your business's name. From the lender standpoint, if I did that with my existing home now, what would you look for as far as income if I haven't yet rented the home yet?
Well, you could put the current home that you're in your business name, but you have to make sure that the lender won't call your loan due, because that was a primary home in your personal name. And when you change ownerships, a lender can say, hey, I'm going to call this loan due and you need to pay it all off because you changed names. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that. Like if you own a home and you're leaving that home and renting it out, it's just, unless you kind of get some time down the line where things change, you're going to want to take the benefits of the lower rate because it was a primary home for you, which means your rate is probably super low. And at some point you're going to have to remove the homestead off of it, but your homestead is your taxes are starting from a homesteaded period, not an investment property. So there's some benefits there, which may outweigh the cons of having it in a personal name. You have to ask your services. So you're going to direct that question there. Hey, if I deed this house over to my business name, what are the ramifications? What's going to happen? When you purchase a home and just put it in your business name, that's totally different. You're not changing ownerships. And so the lender won't have anything to say. And at that point, you can use that the LLC that you have to purchase a home with that name. Most likely, I would say, is that you don't change the name of that home. Yeah, because most often than not, it can be called due. And due just means they're going to make you refinance it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you everyone for joining and taking time out of your Sunday. And Arlicia, thank you for agreeing to co-host today. I hope that you got some great information out of this, and we'll send out an email with the links that we mentioned today, and hope you'll take the next step, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's a phone call to just have more conversation or going ahead to get your pre-approval to actually find out where you stand. Or us meeting to figure out what we need to do to your property for us to get it ready for the market. I just look forward to connecting with each and every one of you whenever your time comes. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And like I said, I'll send out the links to everyone who registered today. So thank you. And I hope you all have a great Sunday. Bye.